Hello. So today we are diving into one of the most misunderstood, but also one of the most fascinating and impactful astrological, events. I am missing a word, but it is Venus retrograde natal. But before we get into the details, we'll start by grounding ourselves in some ancient astrological wisdom, clearing up a few common modern myths, and then move forward. And this topic actually came to me for a reason. Over the past couple of weeks, I worked with several people who all happened to have natal Venus retrograde, and that synchronicity felt like a clear sign, so here we are. So in traditional astrology, a planet's retrograde condition was seen as a debility, as it weakens the planet's expression. And that's because retrograde motion breaks the natural forward-moving rhythm of influence. While a planet in direct motion suggests steady progress, retrograde motion symbolizes disruption or pause. Planets that are retrograde at birth aren't necessarily less important, but their influence tends to be more internalized. They might not drive outer world success in the same obvious way, but they often play a key role in deep personal and spiritual growth. Now, there's also a common belief that retrograde planets give more power to intuition rather than to reason or intellect. But that idea isn't quite accurate, and I think many would agree. Retrogrades don't cancel out logic, they just shift focus inward, asking us to review, reflect, and realign. And because of that, these individuals can become, or simply be, more logical. In the Hellenistic tradition, Venus was called Phosphoros, meaning light bringer, as the morning star, and Hesperus as the evening star. Ancient astrologers like Vettius Valens and Dorotheus of Sidon saw Venus as a benefic, ruler of love, beauty, pleasure, harmony, and agreements. But her retrograde phase, especially when combust, meaning when too close to the sun, was treated with nuance. Now, ancient astrologers didn't panic about retrogrades. They noted that a retrograde planet is metaphorically going against the grain, often representing internalization, delay, or a reconsideration of the planet's themes. And here's a quote from Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos saying, "The planets when retrograde are, as it were, running away from their proper path, and in that condition they are least able to bring forth the effects of their nature." So this doesn't mean bad, but more introspective or withdrawn. When Venus is retrograde, love turns inward. Ancient observers saw this period as one of purification, especially when Venus was invisible, meaning under the beams. Then relationships, aesthetic choices, and even social contracts were seen as needing review, not renewal. It's not about doom. Retrograde Venus isn't here to ruin relationships. It's an invitation to slow down and listen to your desires and values more honestly. It's a natural cycle of revision. During a Venus retrograde transit, let's say that it is wise to delay drastic changes, but it is also a ripe time for re-evaluating old art, rekindling old relationships, which are not always romantic, and understanding how your self-worth has evolved. As for the signs and houses, context is everything. Venus retrograde in Aries in your 7th house is a completely different story than Venus retrograde in Capricorn in the 2nd house. That's where we go next, the basic idea of what happens when Venus is retrograde in different houses. I will not go through all signs and all houses, but here are some examples. Venus retrograde in Taurus. Now this is Venus's own sign. So when she's retrograde here, there can be a reevaluation of what brings comfort and security. These people might have a unique relationship to the physical world, sensual pleasures, money, beauty. All these things may be reassessed over and over in life. In Cancer, there's a lot of emotional sensitivity, but when Venus is retrograde, that softness may not be easy to express. These individuals might guard their hearts and take longer to feel safe in emotional or domestic relationships, often revisiting old wounds or attachments. Venus retrograde in Capricorn often echoes the myth of Psyche's trials. This is a story about earning love not through beauty, but through patience, perseverance, and the courage to endure hardship for a higher emotional truth. Capricorn doesn't give love freely, it earns it. But Venus retrograde reminds that love isn't a reward for performance. So Venus retrograde in Capricorn natally often indicates someone who needs time to trust in relationships, may reverse traditional gender roles around power and money. feels deeply committed but may fear vulnerability as weakness, and has a complex relationship with aging, beauty, and legacy. And in Pisces, Venus is exalted here, but retrograde can make it harder to trust that idealized version of love. These individuals can long for a kind of soul connection, but might struggle with boundaries, fantasy, or disillusionment. Still, there is a deep spiritual capacity for love here. As for the houses, I'll go a bit deeper here. So, for example, when Venus retrograde falls in the first house, there's an immediate sense that one's relationship to beauty, love, and self-worth is deeply internalized and often conflicted. The first house speaks to identity and presentation, and Venus here in retrograde suggests someone who may have struggled early in life to feel worthy of love or desirability. Now, this isn't about low self-esteem in the conventional sense. It's more like a person questioning how and why they're lovable at all. These people can often attract partners or social dynamics where they're treated as a projection of someone else's unresolved desires. There is a theme of being idealized and disappointed, especially in early life. But many with this placement develop a unique or even reclaimed aesthetic later in life. Think unconventional beauty or deliberately anti-glamour personas that still hold a strange charm. These people may also have had to reclaim the body through healing from dysmorphia, chronic health conditions, or an early rupture in self-image. Self-love isn't innate here, it's a practice, often spiritual in nature. In the sixth house, Venus retrograde shows up in matters of work, service, health, and obligation. It often indicates someone who pours a great deal of care into the small things. The love languages here are acts of service, daily rituals, and loyalty. However, there is a twist. Venus retrograde here can struggle to balance service and self-sacrifice. Now, this person may overgive at work or in relationships, expecting unspoken reciprocity. There's often an unresolved conflict around the value of labor, both physical and emotional. Individuals with this placement might have had caregivers who modeled sacrifice over joy, and thus they associate love with doing, fixing, or rescuing. Paradoxically, they may feel uncomfortable receiving care in return. Also, these people can develop a strong appreciation for aesthetic or artistic forms of healing, like herbalism, Ayurvedic practice, or ritual-based self-care, especially during their Venus return years. A ninth house Venus retrograde takes love on a long journey, spiritually, intellectually, even geographically. These individuals are natural seekers, but with Venus retrograde, there's a questioning of what higher values truly are. It usually manifests as a person who resists the cultural or religious values of their upbringing, especially regarding love, intimacy, and gender roles. This placement brings a lover as teacher archetype. These people may fall for professors, mentors, or travelers, not necessarily in the literal sense, but in the symbolic one. There's an undercurrent of romantic idealism tied to philosophy or foreign lands, but one that must be revised or restructured after painful realizations. They may outgrow their ideals or partners as they evolve. There's also a subtle tension here between freedom and intimacy. The heart wants depth, but the soul wants the open road. This person may not settle down easily or may redefine what commitment looks like on their own terms. And let's look at the Venus retrograde in the 12th house. It is like loving in a dream or a memory. Now, this is one of the more complex placements, as the 12th house deals with what is hidden, repressed, or karmic. With Venus here in retrograde, love is often secretive, spiritual, or sacrificial. These individuals might find themselves repeatedly drawn into unspoken love affairs, unavailable partners, or relationships that can't be public for some reason. These people carry what feels like ancestral romantic karma, as if they're living out unresolved stories from the women or lovers in their lineage. And this is especially true if Venus rules the 4th or the 8th house. Art and beauty are often experienced in isolation. There may be an intense private connection to music, poetry, or devotional practices, even from a young age. They often love what they cannot fully have or idealize what is lost. Yet they're often unaware of how much love they themselves radiate, often helping others heal emotionally, sometimes anonymously or behind the scenes. Now, with maturity, this placement can develop an almost mystical capacity for compassion and forgiveness, but only if they first turn that compassion inward. I think this is one of the better placements for Venus retrograde to have. Venus retrograde invites a kind of cosmic mirror stage, a chance to reconsider what we love, how we love, and most importantly, why. It is less about fixing broken things and more about remembering forgotten values. Over 8 years, Venus forms a perfect 5-pointed star or pentagram in her retrograde cycles across the zodiac, and this is known as the Venus Rose or Venus Pentacle. Every 584 days, which is approximately 1.6 years, Venus retrogrades for around 40 days, and each retrograde happens about 216 degrees apart in the zodiac. And after 5 retrogrades, she returns to nearly the same place in the sky. And why this matters? Well, this sacred geometry is one reason Venus is associated with beauty, harmony, and the golden ratio in art and architecture. The pentagram was revered by Pythagoreans and later in mystical traditions like Hermeticism. So Venus doesn't just go backward, she kind of dances in a pattern older than civilization itself. So this isn't random, this is cosmic choreography. Every Venus retrograde is a part of a grand, elegant cycle. During retrograde, Venus is at her perigee, closest approach to Earth. And in astronomy, this means she's not faint or distant. She's right next to us. Symbolically, this is when Venus speaks most intimately to human affairs. She's between us and the sun, moving inward rather than outward. She's not backing away, she's leaning in. That's why her lessons feel so personal. Most people think retrograde equals weak, but this is when Venus is brightest in the morning sky and closest to Earth. She becomes an intensifier, not a diminisher. The ancient Sumerians tracked Venus's disappearance from the sky during retrograde. In mythology, this phase has often been linked with the descent of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, or Ishtar later on, into the underworld during Venus's disappearance from the sky. And she surrendered her symbols of power at each gate. And this can be seen as a perfect metaphor for how we are asked to let go of superficiality and reconnect with inner values. She then rebirths herself and returns as the morning star. So Venus retrograde is our descent into the heart of what we truly want, not just what is pretty or easy. It's not about vanity or lost love. It's about the alchemical process of disintegration and reintegration of values, self-worth, and beauty. I will agree that Venus retrograde is more karmic than other retrogrades, and this is due to her role in unfinished relationships from this or other lifetimes resurfacing, then cycles of value and betrayal repeating through generations, and opportunities to reclaim forgotten talents or past life love dynamics. And this is unique because, for example, Mercury rules mind and logistics, but Venus governs soul memory, especially around the heart, art, and relationships. And when she moves backward, so does our emotional time machine. Individuals with natal Venus retrograde often don't form attractions based on physical appearance. Instead, they're drawn to mental and emotional depth. Connection tends to begin in the mind rather than the body. It is not uncommon for them to experience long periods of asexuality or to live in celibacy, sometimes by choice, sometimes without clear reason. For women especially, this placement can reflect a complex relationship with femininity. In early life, they may feel more aligned with traditionally masculine traits, tomboyish, independent, less focused on appearance. Over time, they often move between expressions of the anima and animus, seeking not to conform, but to integrate. Their path is not about choosing one over the other, but about finding authenticity in the reconciliation of both. Now, Venus retrograde births aren't unlucky. They're iconic. These individuals don't follow the rules of beauty. They rewrite them. Venus, the timeless goddess of love and beauty, has inspired poets and thinkers for thousands of years. While ancient texts don't speak directly about Venus retrograde as we understand it today, the essence of love revisiting itself, turning inward, reflecting, and sometimes rewriting its own story is a universal truth. As we've seen or heard today, natal Venus retrograde invites us to explore love and value from a deeper, more personal place. It reminds us that growth often requires looking backward before moving forward, and that the journey of the heart is rarely a straight line. Let me know if you'd like me to go deeper into the signs and houses when it comes to natal Venus retrograde, or even other retrograde planets, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. In Vedic astrology, while it is not a universal rule, there is a perspective that a retrograde planet can express itself through the energy of the opposite sign. For example, if someone has Venus retrograde in Aries, it may behave in a way that's more aligned with Libra, which is the sign opposite Aries. Now that said, planetary aspects still hold. So Venus retrograde, it gets a bit of a bad rap, like it is the love life glitch or the cosmic plot twist nobody asked for. But here's the thing, Venus isn't broken, she's just taking a little time to pause, reflect, and maybe rethink her playlist. Think of it like love hitting the rewind button, not to mess things up, but to find the parts we missed the first time around. It's kind of like when you accidentally watch a great movie backwards and suddenly see the plot twist in a whole new light. Venus retrograde nudges us to love ourselves better, to question what really makes us feel valued, and to appreciate the quirks and mysteries of our heart's journey. So if your Venus is doing a little dance in retrograde, don't worry, she's just being her mysterious, enchanting self, inviting you to fall in love with you all over again. And honestly, that sounds like a pretty magical place to be. It also reminds me of one of my cactuses. Nothing happens for a long time, and then it blossoms, and it is absolutely stunning. And that's it for today's Cosmic Dive. If you have Venus retrograde in your chart, I'd love to hear how it's unfolded in your life. Those stories are always so revealing. Thanks for watching, and until next week, keep aligning with the stars. Bye!